we can give more applause because we want to have them back here on stage. Please also welcome for the next part. Okay, please also welcome for the next part. We immediately move into the next part of the afternoon, which is a short conversation. Thank you very much for taking time from the jury work. Thank you very much for what we've seen so far. Here is Peter Cowie. Enjoy.
Well, thank you for taking us through that haunting landscape of sound and music. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Do you, when you collaborate, do you always collaborate in the same place, or can you, in different countries, send music and scores to each other and then collaborate, or is it always in the same room?
No, always different, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Always different.
How did you start together?
We didn't know what to play. We just played.
Yeah.
No rehearsal, no sound check almost. Yeah.
But I'm thinking of the film score for The Revenant, for example. How did that come about, Carsten? How were you
Yeah, this of course was a totally different situation as all our previous collaborations. Basically, there was Ryūichi called me to ask if I can join the Revenant score because there was a huge delay in the production of the movie, and there was a need of more energy into the sound department, let's say, into the composing. So I joined in, and
he rescued me. Yes.
Of course, each of you has, of course, performed in your own way. I mean, Ryūichi, we know you. Film buffs know you for scores like Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, and The Last Emperor, The Sheltering Sky, and we know you, Carsten, from you're a driving force in electronic music, and you've performed in places like Guggenheim Museum, Tate Modern, Centre Pompidou in Paris, and I think you also did something together at the Glass House, didn't you?
Glass House,
yeah.
Yes. It was already 2 years ago, but
yes,
in Connecticut.
What you played today reminded me a little bit of that concert at the Glass House, because it starts very, very low, and then...
This one.
Ah, yes, that's right. Just come out.
Just come out. Yeah. he designed it. Nice design, no?
Because there's a gathering force. It starts slow, and then gradually gathers like a storm. The whole thing.
At the Glass House was a very special situation for us because the curator at the Glass House, Irene Schum, invited us to come. And since Ryūichi lives in New York and it's not far, let's say, it's a 1.5 hour drive from New York, and we both loved that location. And maybe what we played today sounded a bit similar, maybe for a simple reason, because in the same way we didn't do any rehearsal, or we just started and let as well the situation speak for itself, and been very curious what comes up. Yeah.
But at that time at Glass House, it was much more dramatic by nature than today, because we don't have so much nature here. And right before we started playing at the Glass House, we had a heavy rainstorm came just 15 minutes before we started. So we started with the sound of the rainstorm. Right. And we modulated, we put some effects. And then gradually we added ourselves into that. Then in the middle of the performance, the rainstorm stopped. Then the sound came in. and it's so dramatic, and we were so moved by the nature and the landscape.
Yeah.
But the original idea I had was, so okay, we're going to perform inside this very minimalistic glass house, designed by Philip Johnson, of course. So let's use the glass house, this house, as a musical instrument. So I put the contact mics on the glass, and then in the middle of the performance, I hit and I scrub.
We should say it's available, of course, here, but it's also available. I've seen on YouTube.
Oh.
You can see
Yeah.
that concert almost.
Yeah, and we had kusama dots on the glass, so it helped. It looked very, I don't know, pretty maybe.
Before we get to the Revenant, could we go back to your early career and how you met Bernardo Bertolucci? Because clearly that was a defining moment in your career as a composer. How did that happen?
Yes. So I worked on Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence with Nagisa Oshima.
Yeah.
Then it was presented in Cannes. So we all went to Cannes. Then Bertolucci was there. And Oshima-san and Bertolucci were very close. So Oshima, or which, I don't know which did which, but probably Oshima-san introduced me to Bertolucci, and in the very middle of a very loud, big party in Cannes. Then he started talking about his next movie, which he was preparing at the time, and he was so excited talking about shooting in Beijing, China, and how hard it was to get the permission by the Chinese Communist Party to shoot inside the palace. So, he probably talked about that for 1 hour, and just standing and talk. Then at the end of the conversation, he said, Ryūichi, the love scene, the kiss scene in Merry Christmas with David Bowie is the most beautiful love scene I ever seen in my life, he said. Okay. I'm very shy, so I couldn't say a word, but he said so. So that's the start.
Okay.
But then maybe 2 years later, I was called by Jeremy Thomas, the producer. He always does very demanding commands, like, hey, Ryūichi, come to Beijing next week. But I have many recordings and tours, concerts. Cancel everything. But yeah, I flew to Beijing. Then I was involved in the shooting in China and Italy. Then nothing happened. Well, in the middle of the shooting, all of a sudden Bertolucci ordered me, hey, the day after tomorrow we have a second coronation scene, shooting here. So you compose music. But I was only hired as an actor at that time, and I didn't even have a piano or anything. But why it seems very hard for me to write, just one day. Bertolucci said to me, "Oh, Ennio always does that. Ennio Morricone always does that."
So you went on to do The Sheltering Sky and Little Buddha, and we have a clip from The Sheltering Sky because I feel it's a score that's very close to your heart, is it not?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, could we have the clip from The Sheltering Sky, please? I saw you beating the time with your hand. Do you conduct your own scores? You insist on that?
I always do. Yeah, only for my music. Yeah.
There's a bridge between your work and say, the 21st century, where so much electronic music has come in. I mean, we all grew up on the symphonic sound of Hollywood, the great big orchestras that each studio had, and Alfred Newman and Max Steiner, people like that.
Yeah.
And then came along, maybe in the 80s, Howard Shore with the electronic scores for David Cronenberg, and then Philip Glass for Mishima, and
Vangelis.
Varese, of course.
Vangelis,
yes. And
Red Runner.
and the Revenant relied on electronic score virtually the entire, as I recall. I haven't seen it again fully for this talk, but Carsten, when you plunged in there, I know you've done some short films already, but this must have been a huge challenge to embark on a 3-hour picture.
Yeah, of course. I mean, basically it was the first time that I did a score, and then such a massive project. And when I saw the movie the first time, I thought like I always expected maybe a science fiction movie will come up or something like what can fit to the idea of electronic music or so. But that I do a score for a Western movie, I would never imagine. I mean, it was kind of difficult for me to imagine that electronic sound has a place there. But Alejandro was very keen on the electronic sound, and as well, when I saw the movie the first time, there been all the tracks in Ryūichi composed basically on electronics, right? So before the orchestra, and we kind of worked fantastic. It worked that fantastic already that when the classical score arrived, Alejandro was always asking, "Can we bring back more electronics into the and it was a nice, let's say, it was a nice contrast actually, and in many ways it worked very well, I thought, and there was a lot of little tracks from both of us already inside. In the temp tracks, and some of my Sarok stuff, and so in a way I know what you want, let's say. It was kind of common ground. Yeah.
Sometimes we made the short cues, short pieces for the same scene, and Alejandro combined both music sometimes, and the secret was Alejandro already had a lot of Carsten's music and our collaborations, as temp music. So in the beginning, I was imitating Carsten Nicolai by myself and our collaboration. But then, later, I thought, or maybe Carsten's part should be done by Carsten. That should be much better and much quicker. So that's one of the reasons I called him. Please come, join me.
And were you under time pressure? I mean, did you have 3 weeks, 3 months? How long to do the score from the time you joined?
I mean, you worked already much longer, like from April or something, or maybe earlier.
Yeah, it took me 6 months.
6 months, yeah.
You joined me the last 1 month.
Yeah, I came in, I got a call like in the first week of September, and basically I had 8 weeks.
And the film had to open by the end of the year.
25th of December was basically, and nobody could believe that it's going to be ready by this time. Actually.
Yeah, the entire film was done 7 days before the release.
Sometimes the best compliment that one can pay to a film score is that it's subliminal, that you're not aware of it. I just saw a film this morning where the music score was terrible, and Why was it terrible? Because I was aware of it the whole time. And that, I think, is a great is a fault. But I don't know if you'd agree with that. That it should be there and that it should be informing the image, but it shouldn't be swamping the image.
Well, definitely, when I started writing film music, in the beginning, I was so egomaniac as a musician. So I don't care the quality of the film, but my music should stand out. But now I completely changed my mind. The music shouldn't disturb the flow and the pace of the film. So, in a way, music should be discreet. That's what I like now.
Carsten, you've had installations at the Biennale in Venice on more than one occasion. So obviously for you there must be a powerful connection between visual art and sound and music.
Yeah, for me it feels very natural that these kind of things work together in a way, even if these worlds are very divided, let's say. It's like this, unfortunately, but a lot of, let's say, when you dive deeper into topics or meet people, then you're realizing there is a very strong connection. Like, Ryūichi has a great background in visual arts too, and worked always with visual artists for videos, for covers. There's a great list of collaborators on this scale too. And I never thought that there should be a big division between this kind of disciplines. And maybe as well, when I grew up in the mid-80s, I grew up in a smaller city called Karl-Marx-Stadt. There was a kind of artistic scene, not a very big one, but it was a very active one. And everybody was an autodidact. Let's say there was no art school, there was no music school, and nobody really had or been obliged to do just one thing. And so everybody did a little bit of this, a little bit of that, experimentation in movie, experimentation in sound, or sometimes both, sometimes collaboration. So this kind of setting, I was growing up when I was 17, 18, and in a way I kept that kind of mind setting.
Also leading, in a way, musicians, artists come from the art side, like Brian Eno, David Byrne, David Bowie, a lot. I'm very exceptional because I graduated the music university, so it's rare. I'm joking.
When you produce a concert like the one we've just heard, is it like Keith Jarrett's A Cologne concert? Is it a one-off thing that will probably never be repeated exactly?
I can't.
Or will you publish? Could you repeat it exactly if you wanted to?
No, that's technically impossible, and I don't remember what I did. Do you remember?
No, it's impossible.
Totally spontaneous.
Yeah, it's very spontaneous.
Each event is a unique experience.
Yes. Did you guys record it?
Probably not.
So could we have a clip from The Revenant now, which is from the end of the film where I think Tom Hardy and Leonardo DiCaprio are fighting. Strong stuff. That was, it's interesting to distinguish now one listens for the music with drums and a sawing string
cello.
As well, cello, as well as this electronic sort of bass line going through.
Yeah, basically three elements all combined. Cello and I improvising on the piano. It's a long improvisation we did in New York. and I asked a German contemporary percussion group to improvise, and it's there. And then, you put some electronic stuff on top of it, all combined, but unedited. So basically, based on the improvisations.
Does a lot depend on the volume at which it's shown in cinemas, in theatres? That it can be, if the projectionist gets it wrong, the volume could be too high or too low for your score?
Yeah, I think generally the volume is sometimes much too high in the moment. I don't know why. Sometimes, especially blockbuster movies, I don't know why they push it that hard. Let's say, because it's not really necessary. Sometimes it's more the dynamic or the transparency more important, and rather than compress it and push it.
Yeah, the music was too loud in the Revenant for me, but maybe not for you.
A name we haven't mentioned yet, but someone who must have had a certain influence on you, I would think, is Toru Takemitsu in Japan, because he was in advance of his time with many of his scores.
Yeah, right. Yeah. He was my hero. I really admired him. But then, in the late 60s, he started using the Japanese ancient instruments. So I became anti-Takemitsu. And, I even made handbills, for anti-Japanesque. And went to one of his concerts and handed to the audience, and I even did twice. And the second time, Toru Takemitsu, holding my handbill, and came to me. "This is what you made? You wrote?" And I said, "Yes." So we got a long, conversation, maybe for half an hour. When I was 20 years old, maybe, very radical. So that was the first time I met him. But in a way, it's kind of a love letter, showing my huge love for Takemitsu. And later on, I saw him several times. But then he passed away too young.
Carsten, did you have a hero when you were growing up, a composer who you really admired, Hans Werner Henze or someone of that kind?
Yeah, maybe one. Maybe without knowing the name in this time, but I was a huge fan of Tarkovsky, of course. I mean, as you. And Artemiev, who composed for the. I really loved. I loved the way it was the composition being done, or it's very different from what we probably consider today a soundtrack, but very nice.
Maybe we should go to Moscow to meet him.
Yeah, still alive.
Still active.
Yeah.
Amazing. Huh?
It's he's a great composer, of course. Yeah, I like him a lot. Yeah.
Well, we've got time for some questions from the audience, and if you can track my attention and then wait for the microphone, which is on either side and up there in the balcony too. So, anyone want the first question? No? No questions? Any answers? No? No question upstairs? Yes, someone up there, I see. Yes, up there in the balcony.
Hi, I'm just a huge fan, so for Mr. Sakamoto, As an innovator of electronic music, you were also one of the first people to think with machines and to experience reality in a different way, in a way that a lot of us are now used to. And I'm wondering if you can sort of speak to the way in which that changed your thinking, specifically with these ideas of nature and reality and life. Thank you.
Good luck.
Wow. The reality and nature. Wow. Well, talking about nature, I started worrying about our environment in early 90s, 92. Around the same time, I was aware of aging. I was like maybe 40, around 40. So the environment is, in a way, outside, and the aging is inside. But to me, around that time, it was connected. The environment is, nature is not something outside of yourself, but it's connected, because everything I put, anything I put into my mouth or I breathe is coming from nature, and this body is part of nature, definitely. And I convinced more so when the big earthquake and the tsunami occurred in northern Japan 7 years ago. And some years later, I got cancer 3 years ago. And again, tsunami and earthquake was a natural disaster, so it's outside, and illness is occurred inside my body. But it more so, I think this is connected. So more and more, I was getting aware of the connection of ourselves and nature. Is that the kind of the answer? I cannot have a very clear idea about my thought of nature and my music. It's hard to tell the connection between my thought about nature and my music. Still, I'm searching the right answer. But definitely there's a connection.
And the Revenant was perfect for that, because the Revenant is all about nature.
Yes.
From start to finish, really.
That's right.
Man as part of nature, fighting nature.
Yes.
Yeah, being saved by nature.
Yeah.
Carsten, you've got, before we have another question, you've got a new film, Like Me Back, coming out, I think, this year with Score. You want to tell us a little about that?
Yeah, just in the middle. Yeah, it's a young Italian director who asked me to do the score, and I did something.
Will it be is it in the line of what we've heard for The Revenant? Is it?
No, it's different. It's pure electronic, and it's not so demanding for many reasons. I have much more freedom. There is not Alejandro sitting next to me. And it's not so long, and it's actually a summer movie, what is a kind of challenge, because what I realize is it's very difficult for me to compose light music, what is not cheesy, let's say. Yeah.
Another question?
It's a real challenge, yes.
I've laid down here, this lady here with blonde hair. There you go.
Huh? Yeah. I wanted to ask both of you maybe about the relationship between sound and image, because you told us, and then there was this remark, and it's too loud, so it's too present, so it's a bad score. And then I was actually thinking, is it all about loudness, or is it also the content, which is sometimes you see that it's exactly just reinforcing what's already there. The music just stuffs it into you, and sometimes it's more like a decoration, and sometimes it's actually saying something else that you didn't see actually, or that works on a whole different level. And I was wondering, how do you relate to image?
But for me, I always want to get the result of 1 + 1 = 3, not 2. But if images are enough by themselves, why we need music? I really dislike to re-narrate by music. The story is already there. The actors are performing, and images are good. So why do we need the music? So there must be some meaning, so some necessity to put music. Otherwise, you don't need. Well, there are many nowadays. There are many movies don't have any music, but they certainly have sounds, and the music is part of soundscapes. I believe sound design is the main tool, and the music is just one of them, one of the materials to me. So maybe I should change my job.
But very often a sound designer will work with a composer on a film,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Certainly it's been the case in a film like Seven, for example. A very close relationship between the sound designer or Silence of the Lambs.
I think as well, when you come from an electronic music background and you produce music or sound, let's say, you're working more on sound. So you're very careful about the quality of the sound, and you respect very much the work of the sound designers. Or sometimes I don't see really, let's say, I don't see the difference actually. And as we compose to the Revenant, normally it's like this, that the dialogues and the atmosphere get mixed, and sometimes the sound effects come in department, and we had to point out, actually, listen to our composition before you're mixing it, because there's a lot of like little noises or things inside what you might not need to do, because we did it already. So we shifted the attention actually to a lot of this kind of very little details. And maybe this is as well what I think we both enjoy, and not using the music as a flavor enhancer or something like to amplify. And when you work with sound on moving images, you can change so much of the meaning. I mean, you have so much power. So in a way, you have to be kind of shy. You have to be kind of see the whole picture still. Like you have to serve the movie rather than push this kind of specific scene too hard or too,
Yeah. Normally, music has its own, like beats or its form. The conventional music has like a 2-bar, 4-bar, 8-bar form, and maybe after 8 bars, maybe there will be a B section, something like that, and it's completely different from the flow of images. Sometimes, well, many times, in many cases, and that's distracting of the flow of images, and I really don't like that. But in special cases, the flow of music, the distraction of music, really sometimes works very well. And sometimes the few films need that kind of distraction, but we should be very careful about that. Yeah.
At the end of that Sheltering Sky extract, there's a moment when the image almost echoes the music, when Deborah Winger lets out this cry of anguish. It's almost part of the score.
Yeah.
So miracle of sound design and music coming together.
Exactly, but the scene we saw the earlier, the shading sky, Deborah's goes a little longer than my pause in the music. So that pause should be a little longer. But I was so dumb at that time, it's still 4/4/4/4. I followed the music grammar too much. I shouldn't. So, if it was today, I wouldn't do that. The music should wait a little longer, maybe 2 seconds more. Then comes back. That would work more beautifully to me.
Another question? There, right in the middle, I've got 3 hands up. The gentleman with glasses, yes. Yeah, everybody has, of course. Okay.
Well, I just want to thank you for the beautiful performance you've just made, and I want to thank you also for you're always a constant source of inspiration, personally as a filmmaker and as a person also. And I just want to, I don't know if you can elaborate a little bit more of how the Tarkovsky experience has inspired you as well. You already mentioned a little bit, but I don't know if you can talk a little bit more.
First. Okay. I mean, when I saw Stalker, it was the first movie what I saw. I was like 18, and for me it was kind of a very long movie, and I remember very well how I left the cinema afterwards. For me it was actually quite abstract movie. Like it was, I mean, in the West it was always, many people thought it was about kind of atomic war, kind of post-atomic war situation, but for me was the story completely about time shift, about time. And I really, since until today, I really love that this part where he throws this kind of nuts and bolts into the field, and in order to test if there is a time shift in front of him in order to continue the path through that zone. And for me, that movie had a great, let's say, it never left me alone. I mean, I was constantly coming back to that movie and watching it. And what is great with Tarkovsky, or not so great, let's say, what in the time when I saw it, I didn't thought that movie is slow. I thought this is absolutely the time, speed. When I watch it now, I think it's incredibly slow. Like it's so slow. Like sometimes when you watch it in the middle of the night, it's difficult to be up, not to fall asleep. But so I always remember that how my perception of time changed as well for that period. And so for me, Tarkovsky has still a strong meaning, and it's one of my favorite movies, Solaris, not because of because it's a science fiction movie, but as well because I love Stanislav Lem. I mean, it's such a great story behind, and not necessarily the story is a science fiction story. It's actually a very basic question. I don't want to go deep into that, but yeah, I really love him. And just to come back to The Revenant, when I saw The Revenant the first time, the first scene actually is almost like Solaris. It starts with this water floating, and there's a few scenes in the church, and what kind of felt kind of coming back home when I saw that scene. So I said like, okay, and I didn't tell Alejandro that I feel so much reminded of Tarkovsky, but I think he knows. Huh?
Yeah, it's obvious. It's obvious. It's a big influence of Tarkovsky on.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, Alejandro. I really loved the title of his book, Sculpting in Time. It's already so musical. sculpting in time is music, actually. It is music. And the great example for me is the beginning of The Mirror. Actually, my favorite Tarkovsky film is The Mirror because it doesn't have a narrative story. It's all, flashbacks and reality and images, back and forth. It's so wonderful. And in the beginning, some unknown guy is coming in. Then he's walking on the grass, and then all of a sudden the wind blows the grass. It's already so musical to me. It's like a symphony, and maybe on the surface the Tarkovsky movies are slow or very quiet or static maybe, but to me it's not. So many movements going on and totally well designed. It's everything was planned, and probably he must be an egomaniac. Yeah, but to me it's true music, and he's a wonderful musician, composer.
Anyone, another question upstairs? Yes, I've got someone, right? Okay.
日本語で質問してよろしいですか。
In Japanese.
Ich kann nachher auf Deutsch übersetzen. Ja. 坂本さんに質問です。私自身海外に長く住んでいるものなんですが、坂本さん自身アメリカやいろんなところにも海外に長く住んでいらっしゃいますが、今坂本龍一さんにとって日本という国はどのような位置づけというか、どのように捉えていらっしゃるのかなということを、ちょっと音楽とは関係ないんですが。
Her question
Can you
is,
translate the question?
is my view to Japan, today's Japan, politically or no?
Everything. Everything here. Everything is okay.
It's a very broad question. I don't know. Sometimes I feel strange. Of course, Japanese language is still most fluent language, and so I do understand what the people are talking about. But sometimes, I'm puzzled about their mind, actually. I think although we have all the information flooding everywhere, but overall Japanese people's minds are getting more closed than before. Like while I was growing up in after-war Japan, it was very free and liberal, very easygoing and somehow. Well, in a way, of course, Americanized very much, but it was very free in the 60s and the early 70s. But then nowadays, it's getting so tight and so conservative. But also in a way, it's happening everywhere in the world. Some group of people are getting so conservative, going backwards, and I'm worried. Yeah.
Yeah, that leads to the rise of nationalism. And,
Yes, everywhere.
Everywhere.
But
One more question. Right at the back. Someone at the back has not heard. No. Okay, that's one there. But yes, okay, you've got it.
Yeah.
Possession is 9/10 of the law.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for the talk and the performance and the works that you have done for the last decades. And it's been amazing to see how you bring people together. And I'm from Japan, and recently I saw your art installation work, and just to see you work with young artists like Hirakawa Norimichi-san or any younger artist, and you experienced in the art movement in Japan in 60s and 70s. Are there any similarities or difference between the times, or like is there a challenge for younger artists to get together, or like can you share your experience as an artist to, and also as a leader? I mean, like to a person who brought people together.
Yeah, first of all, I don't have any problem about differences of countries or ages, generations. I don't have that. So whoever I get interested, I would love to collaborate. We are just living on this small planet, and we are one of millions of other species. We are coexisting together, so I don't have that differences.
I also saw a Glenn Gould gathering thing at
he joined,
and
yes.
That was a concert series in Japan recently, and at this place called Sogetsu Kaikan, which I think it was the center of kind of art movement, and I was curious if you intended to kind of like was expecting sort of because I was there and I felt some chemistry going on.
Yes, I chose that hall because it was the center of Japanese avant-garde scene in the 60s. And when John Cage came to Japan first time in '62, he performed there. And since then, Yoko Ono was performing. She was lying on the top of the piano. So a lot of things happening, and the owner of that hall is a famous film director. Toru Takemitsu worked with him many times. Hiroshi Teshigawara. So it was this center, and but since Hiroshi Teshigawara passed away, it has been very quiet. So we want to bring the excitement back at that place. So that's one of the reasons I picked up that place. And I actually personally, I first time went to that hall when I was 11 years old. Went there, looked at some performance like we did, like throwing a baseball into the piano, and the alarm went off, something like that. So, 11-year-old boy thought, no, is this music? Okay, maybe I can do it. That's the very first experience I got about that kind of music. Well, I don't know music or not, but so yeah, talking about the 60s, it was very radical in all genres: cinema, theater play, music, everything, poetry.
Oshima's films about rebellion.
Yes.
Yeah.
And 68, of course, I was already a fan of Oshima and Godard. I grew up watching those people's films, a lot in the 60s. And then one day, there was a huge demonstrations going on in Shinjuku, and Oshima is the front of the demonstration, battling with the riot police. So, oh wow, this guy is something. That's the first time I saw Mr. Oshima.
Diary of a Shinjuku Thief.
Yes.
Yeah.
Shinjuku riot.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time, and we know you're on the jury, so you have a lot of duties to do. Still probably films.
Yes,
to do.
we will have a fun time.
But I just want to do a plug for your new record, both of you. Lars, it's on LP, it's on CD too, I guess. So just coming out. So run after that. Thank you both very, very much for your concert.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.